The villagers gathered under a bruised evening sky, their torches trembling like fireflies trapped in the fists of frightened men. Smoke and the scent of pitch mixed with damp earth, choking the narrow lanes between the cottages. Every face glowed orange with flickering fear, the kind that spreads faster than flame, the kind that needs no proof. In the center of the square stood Elara. Her wrists were bound, but she held her chin high, her dark hair tangled by the wind, her eyes fixed not on the villagers, but on the gathering storm beyond them. The clouds rolled heavy and dark, bruised with violet and iron gray, the first low rumble of thunder echoing from the hills. It was as if the heavens themselves were waiting. She must confess, the priest thundered, his voice cutting through the rain-scented air. Confess, and the fire will cleanse your soul. Elara said nothing. She had been silent since they dragged her from her cottage that morning, silent as they overturned her shelves, shattered her jars of herbs, and stomped through the dried petals and powdered roots that once brought healing to their homes. She had been their midwife, their herbalist, their healer. She had eased their pains when sickness came, whispered prayers when children were born blue and breathless, and stayed by their bedsides through winter fevers. But now, none of that mattered. Fear had turned her gifts into proof of guilt. An old man near the front spat on the ground. The well soured after she blessed it. He shouted, "My cow's milk turned to blood." She spoke to the moon. Cried another, "I saw her in the woods at night." She cursed the harvest, shouted a third, voice breaking with panic. The priest lifted his hand for silence. "You see," he said solemnly, turning to the trembling crowd, "the signs are clear. When the rains failed, who among us did not hear her whispering to her garden at midnight? Who did not see the ravens circling her roof?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd, swelling into something darker, that feverish unity that only fear can create. Elara finally looked at them, her gaze slow and deliberate. "You begged me for rain," she said softly. Her voice was hoarse but calm. "You asked for the fever to break, for the earth to feed you again. And I prayed for you. I spoke to the wind and to the soil because none of you would listen to the silence between them." Her words only stoked the fire. "Listen to her blasphemy," the priest cried. "She admits it, communion with the elements, unnatural tongues." A boy near the edge of the crowd, barely 12, flinched and hid behind his mother. He remembered Elara giving him honey when his throat burned, remembered her laugh when he brought her a sparrow's feather and called it magic. His mother pulled him close, whispering, "Don't look at her. Don't listen." Elara closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard the whisper of the forest beyond the fields, the same forest where she'd gathered herbs since childhood, where the world still felt alive and kind. She wondered if the trees were listening now, if the storm gathering on the horizon could hear her heartbeat. The priest stepped closer, holding up a wooden cross. "You may yet find mercy," he said, his tone heavy with false compassion. "Renounce your sins, woman. Speak the name of the devil who gave you power." Her eyes opened again, calm, steady, filled with something older than defiance. "The only power I ever knew," she said, "was the one that heals. The one your fear has poisoned." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd, but the priest would not yield. "Then you leave us no choice." He raised his hand toward the men behind her. "Bind her to the oak before the storm falls." As the mob moved, lightning flared far in the distance, silent, sharp, like the flash of a blade. A child screamed, and the villagers froze for an instant. They dragged Elara through the mud-slicked path that wound past the last of the cottages, the torches casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to follow her like ghosts. The rain was beginning to fall in uneven spatters, the kind that came before a storm fully broke, cold needles against skin. Ahead, the ancient oak waited, its gnarled branches sprawling like twisted arms reaching toward the sky. The villagers had always whispered that the oak was older than the village itself. It had survived lightning strikes, droughts, and fires. Some said it grew where a god had once fallen, others that it marked a place where the earth still remembered magic. Tonight, it would serve as their pyre. The priest lifted his lantern as they reached the clearing. "Bind her fast," he ordered. The men hesitated for a moment, the wind was rising, howling through the branches with a sound like wailing voices. One of them, young and pale, muttered, "Father, perhaps we should wait till morning. Do you question divine duty?" The priest snapped, "Would you risk her cursing us before dawn?" They tied Elara's wrists to the thick trunk, the rope cutting into her skin. Her white shift clung to her from the rain, her hair plastered to her face, yet her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, a steady, unbroken calm that unsettled even the bravest among them. The priest raised his arms to the heavens. "For your sins of witchcraft, your unholy pacts, and your rebellion against the Almighty, we cast you out." He thundered, "May your soul be purified in flame." At that exact moment, the heavens answered. A crack of thunder so violent it seemed to split the sky in two rolled over them, drowning his final words. The earth trembled underfoot, and the villagers stumbled backward, clutching one another. Then came the rain, not gentle, not cleansing, but fierce and wild, a deluge that drowned the torches and turned the ground to black mire. The flames sputtered and hissed out, smoke curling upward like ghosts fleeing the fire that never came. "It's an omen," someone cried. "God rejects the offering." "No," the priest shouted over the roar of the storm. "It is her doing. She commands the storm." Lightning flared across the sky, blinding white, followed instantly by a crack that shook the trees. It struck not far off, a line of pure, searing energy slamming into the earth, filling the air with the smell of ozone and burnt leaves. The oak groaned, its bark glowing briefly with strange blue veins that pulsed like living light. The villagers screamed. A woman dropped to her knees, clutching her child. Men stumbled away, slipping in the mud, shouting prayers that were half curses. But at the heart of it all stood Elara, her ropes now smoldering where the lightning had touched them. With a sound like snapping branches, the bonds gave way. She fell forward to her knees, then rose slowly, her face turned upward into the torrent. The lightning came again, not at her, but around her, tracing her silhouette in pale light. The storm didn't strike her down. It danced with her. The rain caught in her hair, her eyes reflecting the crackling sky like mirrors of fire and water. "Elara," someone shouted in terror. "She's calling the storm." Her voice, when it came, was not a shout but a resonance, low and strong, carried effortlessly through wind and thunder. "You call me witch," she said, each word measured, deliberate. "But who among you gave thanks when the rains fed your fields? Who questioned when the fever broke after my prayers? You loved the magic when it saved you. Only now, when your fear demands blood, do you call it evil." The priest raised the cross high, his hand trembling. "Silence. You blaspheme against the Lord." Elara's eyes found his. "No," she said quietly. "I only speak his forgotten tongue." The wind surged, snapping the branches overhead. Lightning struck again, this time the oak itself. But instead of burning, the tree blazed with blue fire, veins of light crawling across its bark like liquid silver. Sparks danced across the clearing, and for a heartbeat, it seemed as though stars had fallen to the earth. The villagers ran. Some dropped their torches, others their faith. They fled into the rain, screaming of the devil, of wrath, of divine punishment. When dawn broke, the village lay in stunned silence. The storm had passed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving a world washed clean, dripping, and shimmering with the scent of wet earth. The cobblestones were slick, the thatched roofs glistened, and every puddle reflected a pale, watery sun. Birds emerged cautiously from the trees, shaking raindrops from their feathers, as though testing whether the world was safe to breathe again. The oak stood at the edge of the square, scarred by lightning but alive, its branches still trembling as if in gratitude. Blue veins of light ran along its trunk, faint and flickering, a reminder of the storm that had danced around Elara. The villagers approached cautiously, their steps hesitant. The ropes lay in a smoking heap at the base of the tree, singed but empty. She was gone. Not a trace of her remained, save the lingering hum of power that seemed to pulse from the oak itself. Some swore she had been taken by angels. Others whispered that she had merged with the storm, that the heavens themselves had carried her away. Children peered into the puddles, half hoping to see her reflection, half afraid of what might stare back. Mothers clutched their little ones close, the events of the night etched into their eyes with a mixture of awe and terror. The priest knelt before the oak, his face pale, lips moving in prayers that sounded hollow even to him. His cross hung limp in his hands. "Forgive us," he murmured, voice shaking. "We saw the truth and feared it, we condemned the innocent." Days passed, and the miraculous consequences of that night became impossible to ignore. Crops that had seemed doomed began to grow with unnatural vigor, seeds that should have withered sprouted overnight, leaves unfurling with a shine no sun could create. Wells that had run dry overflowed with clear, cold water. Sick children who had lain pale and trembling began to regain strength. Even the animals, once restless and weak, flourished as if the storm had healed the world itself. The villagers, once united in fear, began to whisper her name, first in terror, then in reverent awe. "Elara," they said, "the one the sky favored." Mothers told their children stories of the witch who commanded lightning, of the woman who walked in storms. And the children, wide-eyed, would ask if they, too, might someday speak to the wind. Yet for all their stories, Elara remained unseen. No footprints marked the forest path, no trace lingered beyond the glowing oak. Those who tried to follow her vanished into the mist or returned shaken and silent, claiming only that they had seen a figure of light gliding between the trees, hands lifted toward the heavens, eyes brighter than the storm itself. Time did not erase her legend, it only deepened it. Each year, when the sky darkened and thunder rolled across the hills, the villagers would fall silent, heads tilted upward. Some believed it was a warning. Others whispered that it was a greeting, the promise that Elara still watched over them, her power flowing through the earth and rain. And the oak, now sacred, was left untouched. It became a place of pilgrimage, of offerings, of quiet prayers whispered into the bark, hoping to catch even a flicker of her favor. Generations passed. Children of children grew up learning the story, the night the sky itself took the side of a woman they had once called witch. Fear remained in their hearts, yes, but it was tempered now by respect, by a knowledge that power need not be cruel, that what is feared is not always evil. And with each storm that rolled in from the mountains, the memory of Elara lived on, not as a threat, but as a reminder, that courage can be quiet, that truth can withstand fear, and that sometimes, the world itself bends to the side of those who act with love and wisdom. On certain nights, when the clouds gather and lightning splits the horizon, villagers claim they see her again, a glowing figure in the storm, hands outstretched, moving like wind among the raindrops. Some say she speaks in a language older than speech, calling the rains to nurture the fields, calling the wind to guide lost travelers, calling the world to remember that mercy and courage are not bound to flesh alone.